Hello, my friendly noodles. Back again, another review. Today we're doing a little meandering talk about the combat codes. Another book I have been reading. It is a bit different. It's a little bit different than what I'm used to, I will say. Combat Codes follows a young boy by the name of Saga. I have no idea how to pronounce his name properly. Young Saga wakes up suddenly in an alley, not too sure, a little bit vague on that one, and is taken in by what seems to be a slaver. And this slaver puts Saga to work. And when I say work, I mean puts him in a ring with a bunch of other boys to beat the living shit out of each other for money and entertainment. So we're starting off well. We're starting off on a really positive, loving note. And you're wondering, why would they do this? Is some kind of dark world where people are just cruel and unusual like the Romans? No, actually, it's for a greater purpose. Because these folk are Grievar, whatever you want to call them. So in this world that we are being shown, there is a hierarchy of folks. There is sort of a ranking, a class system, effectively. Although I do believe that even though it's a little bit vague, it's not really shown in the first novel, I do believe people are actually different races of folks. They've just come together in different ways at this point in time. So we have people known as the daimyo, we have the griever, we have even, they're essentially called more like workers and whatnot, but grunts. So there's people who work the fields, do menial tasks and jobs, and they seem to be much more of our farmers and other kind of folk like that. You have the daimyo, who are these rich, weak-looking, fragile-looking beings who seem to rely heavily on advanced technology. And then we have the griever, who are a race of brute fighters. And just that would have been interesting, but there's a whole philosophy behind what's happening here. And our young character is a griever who gets thrust into this world. He's very, very confused. He doesn't understand why, because he's grown up his entire life on this island. And he's been trained by his master with his two brothers, and he's being heavily trained to follow the combat codes. And the combat codes are what the Grievar as a nation, as a peoples, follow. Now, instead of having wars that destroy the world and all sorts of stuff, the Grievar have always handled conflicts for resources, for all sorts of things, through hand-to-hand combat against two fighters only. And that is how they resolved issues, which is phenomenal if you think about it in the grand scheme of things. It would be better if there was no fighting at all, but if we were going to fight, at least only two people have to get hurt, not an entire nation's worth of innocent civilians. So in this world, what we're seeing is that there used to be these huge wars going on, and the Grievar stepped up. They stepped up and said, we will take the brunt of everything for you guys. We will fight so that you do not have to. And our young Saga is being raised on this island with these codes in mind, this codex of ideas and philosophies around combat, around how to think of your body and your mind, and how to live in the world and respect others. And it's a really honor-based system. And now at this point in time, it's kind of been perverted. Everything now that it's been brought to this large scale, you have cities warring against each other, warring in these hand-to-hand combats over resources and land, and it's become much more of a thing about profit and control, and not so much about the honor of it. And we are kind of seeing this from two different sides. So Saga, our young boy, who ends up thrust into this world where he eventually ends up at the higher levels learning about this stuff, and eventually on a path towards fighting for the city-state as a whole. And we're also following it through one of the Grievar knights, who is past his heyday. He used to be very, very famous, and now he's what's called a scout. And these scouts go around and they try to find talent, Grievar talent, to be able to bring to the Lyceum, or Lyceum, depending on how you want to say it, which is the main training place for Grievar Knights. And a Grievar Knight is a title for someone who is not just fighting on the street like Seago, but someone who is going to be fighting against other Grievar from other city-states for the honor, which has been twisted and corrupted at this point, to be able to control land and get resources and all sorts of things. And so this former Grievar Knight, who is now a scout, which he hates, and you're seeing all of that corruption and how things have been perverted in his mind through his views, kind of gets shunted over and taught and understood through Seago's eyes, who is found by this Grievar Knight, brought up into the Lycam, and then you're getting to explore the world. And you're also seeing, of course, Seago himself has an interesting past, and there are secrets and machinations going on, and you're seeing little glimpses of these daimyo, and there's really weird ones. There's people called the Bitminders, who are little, I don't know, the way they're described, it's like, it looks like a brain with a face in a tank. It's very disturbing. So there's a lot of different aspects, and even within the daimyo culture, there's many different factions and sort of peoples and different races and class systems that have affected people's growth in different ways. And so there's this whole world that seems very, very fascinating. Now, is it shown to us in the best of ways? I will say that one of the weaknesses of this novel is that our main character, although very, very interesting, does not have a support cast around him that kind of lends itself to developing him as a character, much as the people around him. He ends up in a team of people, and although he does have some affection and there's definitely some strong connection between two of those people and him, we don't really get much background at all of those people. We don't get any point of view, and the rest of the team, we're meant to feel bonded to them as the novel is progressing, but there's no time spent with them, barely at all. They're shown off relatively simplistically, and so we're not really feeling that cohesive whole between him and his team. And when he gets very emotional and there's a depth of intensity to his stuff, especially in regards to his teammates, we don't really feel it as much because we don't really know them that well. Unfortunately, the same thing happens with his relationship between him and the Grievar Knight. There's just not enough time spent between those two. There's a short period of time where they're together, and then he is separated from him, and so we don't really care much about the relationship either. The combat in the series is very, very fun, very interesting. It's extremely technical. There's definitely a lot pulled from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because there's a ton of grappling and shifting around and groundwork. So definitely pulled a lot from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There is, of course, some striking. These Grievar are meant to be perfect fighting machines. So they are definitely learning all sorts of different combat styles. There is no weaponry, which is kind of interesting as well. There's no swords, there's no knives, there's no nothing. I guess it's because it goes against the purity and the honor of just this fisticuff fight that they want to have going on. Although I feel like that would have maybe added another dynamic to it, maybe if they have two different styles of fighting, but still very enjoyable. Seago's backstory and the way they might be moving forward with it in the second novel definitely interests me, but again, there's a lot of the world talked about, but not properly described. And so you don't really understand where all this is coming from. You don't really understand the lore of who the daimyo are, who Grievar really are, how this all came to be. There's little bits and pieces given to us, but by the end of the first novel, you still don't really understand or care much about this whole conflict that's going on. Even the depth of the Grievar Knights' kind of sorrow that they're losing all these codes, we don't really get to know them that well. There's not enough time. It's a relatively quick, small novel, and things kind of progress rapidly from one point to another if we're looking at it in like little periods of time between our introduction to Seago, his time by himself on the island, and then to when he's fighting in the pits, to when he's at the Lycam, and we're trying to go through these different points of view within the city and the world. We still don't get enough of why this is being done. Why do the Grievar even give a shit what other people are doing? Why are they helping them? Why are they fighting for them? Why are the daimyo sort of in charge? Yes, they have technology, but why don't the other people have technology? Why is it only them? Is it actually a class? Things are not described well enough to really feel like the lore and the back story and just the world itself is vibrant enough. But that being said, Siegel as a character is interesting enough by himself, and the little bits and pieces of the world that we do see are interesting enough as well to drive us forward. And the rapidity, the pacing, the rapidity of it is fun in its own way, because it is more of an action novel. And so that kind of rushing forward and bulldozing through a lot of stuff as our main character is just fighting his way to understanding in a certain sense, it's nice. It's fun. I enjoyed it. I finished this novel relatively quickly. I would still recommend it to people. I'm not too sure if I'm going to be checking out book 2, to be honest, but I think I'm on the fence of that, more so just because I'm not really in the mood for it right now. I definitely think I will most probably reread this first novel sometime in the future and then advance on to the second book. I feel like another read of this might give me a little bit more perspective that I just didn't catch as much the first read through, so that might be warping a little bit my opinion on it. But if you're someone who likes action, you appreciate the technical aspects of combat, especially if you're someone who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're gonna really like this series. The characters overall, even though you're not really getting much depth out of them, these secondary characters, I mean, you're still gonna enjoy them. They're fun, they're pleasant. It's kind of just focusing in on Sigo. And I keep saying the Griever Knight. I'll be honest, I'm blanking on his name for some reason. But they're both fun characters to follow along. It is a little bit unfortunate that we didn't have a little more time spent developing them personally, but overall, it's a series worth reading, I would assume. Because if the second book continues the flow of the first, I think most people will like them. Yeah. Fighting stuff is always kind of fun, you know? I'm a guy. I like it when people punch each other. Does that make me a barbarian? I don't know. Well, let me know what you think down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the website, geektails.ca. And as always, peace, love, and all that, you know. Farewell.